everybody. Welcome to the Locker Room. This is Southland's podcast for men, where we redeem men's conversations, talk about the right things in the right ways. My name is Scott Hatfield, and it's cool to have you on today listening or watching the podcast. We do this podcast because we want to invest in men. We want to build a culture of godly men who lead out and serve, who fight for the most important things. And we are in our 10th week, double digits. It's going to be a good one. And we're going to talk about two words again here in a few minutes that hopefully will clarify some things for you as men and how we view ourselves. And excited about our guest today. Today's guest is a younger leader. Man, actually, as we've been sitting here with Zach and JR talking with him, there's some legends in here, some early young legends. And so with this guy, I love his heart to serve and grow. You're a sponge. I appreciate your humility and the way that you serve people. You've been a part of some fight clubs with me, and watching you invest in guys has been awesome. Emerging leader. He was a student in our ministry back in the day.
Yep.
And lots of other things. But he's on staff. He came on staff without a paycheck for a while, which is really awesome unto the Lord.
Bring that up.
Yeah. His initial position was young adults and church planting. We'll touch that a little bit. And more recently, he stepped into his new role at the Lexington campus, which is really, really exciting. I'm excited for the team and also for those students. You're going to take over high school ministry from Chapman Bean as he goes and plants a church.
Right.
And what's even cooler is that you're about to take the big plunge and get married to an amazing woman. Wouldn't have happened had you not come on staff here.
I know, man. Isn't that cool?
Hannah Gilbert, 32 days away,
Yep.
April 30th.
But who's counting, right?
That's right.
I am.
Our guest,
I'm counting.
Connor Hall. How you doing, man?
Good, man.
Good.
How are you, bud?
I'm good.
You nailed
I'm
that
good.
intro, man.
Yeah, I
But
did.
you
3
hyped
times.
me up way too much.
Yeah, very good. You had a lot in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot on the backside of your baseball card too. You've got a lot of packed in a short time here on staff, and it's great to have you on the podcast. And I know you've been on before, and we'll get to what we're going to talk about. But let's start with the most important thing right now in your life. You get married in 32 days.
Yeah.
How's that feeling?
Buddy, I'm ready.
Are you?
I'm ready. Me and Hannah, we're ready for different reasons, I think.
Yeah.
I'm ready mainly because I'm excited to marry her.
Yeah.
She's ready because she's done planning this wedding. So
Okay.
we're both ready. And
Is her stress level high? Your stress level low?
yeah,
Both?
typically,
Okay.
yeah. Mine will get higher the higher hers gets.
Yeah.
Just as I try to
Take it on.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me help you carry this.
Yeah,
You're like,
exactly.
you can't. What are you gonna do with this?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
It's like food,
Yeah.
notes, whatever.
Yeah, seriously.
Yes.
I've been zero help to this
Gotcha.
season, but I've done my best, just kind of be there for her. But yeah, we're excited and exhausted.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
those could be 2 words. You can do a different podcast someday about wedding planning.
That's right. Put somebody on a cot right over here.
That's
Just
right.
lay them down.
Padded room.
Hey, so you work with young adults, and you are in some ways a young adult. And just as we kick this off, thinking about lots of our single guys that are listening, or even guys that are dating. This is a freebie. It's not really where we're going today, but
Sure.
What were the expectations that you had in dating? What was it that you were looking for?
Sure. Well, honestly, in my early 20s, I think I had all the wrong ones.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't have to answer that question back before I knew Jesus, because I could rip it off.
Seriously, yeah, I knew him, but I was a bigger fan than I was a follower. I think back in those days. But
yeah.
I think in my early 20s, I think my expectations were. I made the same mistake I see a lot of guys make, and I let my eyes kind of do all the thinking for me, and that tends to get us in the most trouble.
Yeah.
So most of those relationships were pretty short-lived, and honestly were pretty surface level. And then by the time I was in my mid-20s, I got smart enough to know, hey, I want to get married, but then I tended to kind of date on like resume and kind of like pedigree almost of like, all right, like
Good
she comes from a
family,
good,
education.
exactly. She gonna have a good job, like stuff like
So
that.
like it's a job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can I be a trophy husband?
That's right.
Like those
Yeah.
types of
Yeah.
things.
Can I
It
stay
just-
at home?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And not that necessarily those things like just all together don't matter, but it wasn't really until my late 20s it was really just about Jesus. And
Yeah.
so late 20s I kind of move up here, and right around that time is when I met Hannah, and so those things came together right about the right time. But yeah.
And on staff was, it's funny.
right.
I mentioned this to you the other day, but Vandy and I were talking about something, and we were standing outside, and we looked over and we saw down in your little area, your little office area. Saw you and Hannah down there. Maybe it was a little lunch break. I don't really know.
That's right. It was a long lunch break.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
I mean, she wasn't sitting in your lap or anything weird.
No,
I mean, there was
plenty of windows.
Room for the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
Yeah,
Left plenty of room. That's right.
Hey, so in this, I think that sometimes we don't understand or we underestimate the importance of friendship, relationship, getting to know this person that you're dating. We kind of start and just romance just kind of drives it. But what did you guys do to really get to know each other, foster that relationship? Because it's the most important part of this.
Yeah, for sure. I think the things we did well is we just talked a lot.
Yeah.
Like we spent a lot of time together. It was funny. Actually, the first time I ever saw her, I was living in Nashville. I was working in ministry, and it's so interesting because I would keep up with Southland, just kind of what you guys were doing. I was normally 2 or 3 weeks behind, but I would watch, just online stuff. And honestly, I think it was through COVID or something, man, but she was hosting and just doing like the announcements of her video. And I remember watching it in my kitchen and just being
How about that?
Man, they got some talent up there in Nicholasville.
Online. I'm an online member now.
That's right. And then I immediately just like went back to what I was doing, didn't think another thing about it, and had no idea I was looking at my future wife, which is pretty awesome.
How crazy.
But moved up here. We actually
didn't know her before.
Okay. It was cool because we grew up in kind of doing student ministry stuff, but we knew a lot of the same people, and I actually had heard her name before, but I never met her. And, she went to LCA. I was living in Georgetown, went to Scott County growing up. So we never met each other, but it was kind of cool. And then we actually, when I moved up here, we actually sat next to each other at like a church planting event that we were both just volunteering at. And she was sitting in the back row, kind of all by herself, and I just, saw an empty seat.
Volunteering can change things.
Right.
We're going to kind of talk about that.
We're going to touch on that a little.
That's right.
But yeah, like I sat down next to her, and I remember just doing everything I could just to try to make her laugh.
Yeah.
And, luckily by the end of it, she gave in and grinned a couple times. But yeah, so and then from there, honestly, I just, I spent way too much time in the front office. She was our office host at the time. And so I just honestly just tried to get to know her and make her laugh. And
anybody bring a package for me here today?
Yeah, it's every day.
Voicemail or anything?
Yeah, it's funny how many times I got lost. I grew up here at Southland, I was just like, can you show me where so
I'm so confused.
I'm just so thank you so much for your help. Yeah.
That's
so
good.
but
how long have you guys dated?
Let's see. I guess we started dating August of 2021. So it's been about a year and a half. Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah.
And so
how did that move from, and I think what's important, again, this is not about that today, but just for young adults and people that are dating, you date toward marriage.
Yeah.
We're not playing around. The stakes are too high.
Yeah.
And you don't want to waste your life. You don't want to waste your time. And so, like, was there a moment, or what was it that was almost like a tipping point for you where you went, man, I can really see and maybe it was early on.
Yeah.
You just went, I can see myself with her for the rest of my life.
No, for sure. Yeah, it actually was pretty early on. One night that summer that I moved up, I would try to kind of time it when she was leaving, just try to low profile kind of thing. But I would try to walk out normally when she was walking out.
Sure.
And so I was able to do that and just walk her to her car a few times. But then one particular time I walked her to her car, it's really embarrassing. We kind of just stood there by our cars, and we laughed and we talked, and we laughed and we talked until long after everybody had left. And like, I won't say how late it was, but it got dark.
Sure.
And it was summer.
Sure.
So you think about how late it gets dark in the summer, but I remember.
I bet you guys took some heat from people.
Or
just
man.
eyes.
Once they heard that story, dude, it was like, oh, really?
Yeah,
all right.
that?
Yeah, how about that? So it was funny because the next morning I had to get up really early and drive back to Nashville for something. But I remember kind of thinking on my drive down there, like, man, you've never stood in the same spot for 5 hours and just talked to somebody. And so I remember God kind of grabbing my attention, going,
Pay
"Hey,
attention to this, bro.
Yeah, lean in.
Yeah,
let's look at this." And I don't
see me here.
Exactly
See what I'm trying to tell you here.
Yeah,
that's right.
I don't know if it was some magic moment, but that was definitely the moment I went, man, there's something really special about this girl. And
awesome.
I think it was just because I could just talk to her for that long, and I could just be myself.
Yeah.
I didn't I didn't have to try to be somebody else, which I had tried to do a lot in dating. And, I just felt like we just clicked. And so that was kind of the moment I think I knew, man, something's up here. So luckily she felt it around that time too. So
that's good.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Any wisdom for guys that are maybe have been in a more recent spot as you, when you went, I think she's the one, and you're going to get a ring, and you're going to eventually go talk to her parents, and of course her mom's passed away.
Yeah.
And she's got a dad that's legendary around here. He's a legendary walker.
He's awesome. Yeah.
Everybody sees him.
Everyone loves him.
But having that conversation, any tips for guys? Because sometimes I don't think guys realize how important that is, to ask for permission and to come humbly go and go, hey, listen, I just want you to know, and I'm asking for your permission. But what was that like for you? What did you learn? What lessons can you impart to those who maybe are freaking out about that?
Oh yeah, it's worth freaking out about. I can tell you that.
That's right.
And the importance of just that conversation, especially as a dad. And your daughter recently got married, which is cool. But I think you remember around the time that, because I was telling you about it right before I was getting ready to do it, and I think you remember how nervous I was, but. Honestly, what I would tell you is just be honest.
Yeah.
And if you've led well throughout the relationship so far, if you're honest,
it's not a surprise.
Yeah, you're not gonna have anything to worry about.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have to, try to concoct some great, story or whatever to explain why you're the one that should be allowed to take her hand in marriage. You're just gonna be able to say, hey, here's the conversations that we've had. Here's what those looked like, and that's kind of what I did with her dad.
And you didn't just build a relationship with her; you built a relationship with her dad.
Tried to absolutely, and he allowed me that, which was great.
Yeah.
And he's such a great guy. Like, he's just warm personality, never met a stranger, and just he's been great to us just throughout our relationship. He's been great to me, and so I don't think I was as nervous as if he would have been like super stone cold or anything like that. But I took him to a UK game, and it was funny because they won big, which I'm really grateful.
Yeah, that's right.
They've
been crushed by 20.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Jacob Toppin helped me out that night.
Yeah,
so
thank you, Jacob.
Yeah.
He has no idea the impact of his game.
No clue. I'll write him a letter sometime. But
That's funny.
It was funny. I found out through the course of the game, it was actually her dad's first time going to a UK game.
Oh,
and
cool.
So that was kind of neat. Yeah. And then just we're driving home. I dropped him off, and I just said, hey, if you got a second, I wanted to talk to you about something. And she was out of time, so he and I had plenty of time just to chat, and just kind of said, hey, I love your daughter, and I'm crazy about her, and I would die for her, and just kind of talked about our relationship, talked about where it had been.
Speaking of death, I'm just kidding. He gets out a gun.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
It's time for you to go.
He could have.
That's
He could have. I took a risk, but no. I just kind of I let him in on what those conversations she and I had about marriage looked like.
Yeah.
And I just kind of shared what we talked about, and so that way he could not only see my side of things, but also kind of how she was feeling. And man, he was so supportive.
That's
and
cool.
gave me some great advice. Just on just being a husband, and just and just for our relationship going forward. And it was great, but awesome. I drove away from their farm feeling probably 15 pounds lighter after that was over. So, but it's general advice: just be honest, but it's how you lead throughout the relationship and how you treat her. And if you do that well,
build a relationship. There's no surprises.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point they're probably expecting it, and if at some point it doesn't come,
you almost hope that they are.
May be the problem.
Yeah. You should hope
if
that
it's
they
right.
are. Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, do you guys? You're going on honeymoon right after you get married, or what are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm actually in charge of that.
Or something?
Yeah,
that's cool. That's cool.
Right. Yeah,
getting a couple day passes.
Yeah, awesome. Gaddy Town.
Oh, here you go. Yeah, nice.
No, I actually. So she's been in charge of kind of reception, all that kind of stuff. I've been predominantly in charge of how the flow of the ceremony. Some of that's just because I've done weddings and stuff like that. But and then the other part of it, she's like, "You handle the honeymoon. I don't necessarily care where we go, so it's a surprise. I'm not going to tell her until we're actually going.
Yeah.
But I've got something planned, and just get away.
And she doesn't know.
Relax. She doesn't know.
Wow.
So she knows I'm planning it. She knows when we're leaving, all that kind of stuff. A couple weeks out, I'll tell her like, "Hey, here's what you should pack," and I won't be,
pack a bathing suit, a toboggan.
Yeah. Then we go to Alaska.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, we'll take some time off after.
All right, we'll touch a couple of these fun questions, just a couple of them.
I always love these. So.
When you were a kid, what did you hope that you grow up and do vocationally? Did you have an idea?
Yeah. Yeah, when I was real little, I wanted to be Robin from Batman and Robin. I thought that was like a job you could have. You know,
You didn't want to be Batman. You want to be Robin.
Isn't that weird? Just
Yeah.
Boy Wonder, I guess.
Did you like his outfit?
Yeah, I like it
his
better. You can
blouse
see his
and his
face
cape.
better. It didn't seem as hot. You know, it's constricting. So I
Not
think I
all the
just
pressure, not all the responsibility.
yeah, that's right. You know, just
Batman's pretty cool.
That's right. So
That's funny.
yeah, I thought that was like a job you could do, and you know, I realized pretty quick it wasn't. But no, growing up, I think I really wanted to be in the Coast Guard. I always loved helicopters, still do.
Yeah.
Was fascinated by them. I love the water. I love to swim. I love to be outdoors. And so I either thought I wanted to be like a helicopter pilot or be like one of those rescue divers. And so I thought that for a long time. And that dream had kind of died by the time I got older, but then I saw this movie in high school, like The Guardian with Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
Turns out the ocean's pretty scary. So
It's pretty big.
It's a pretty big deal.
It's cold too.
Yeah,
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, Coast Guard takes a bad rap, but which if you're in the military at all, you're my
man.
hero. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
They're the
those
best.
are some tough dudes. So yeah, that I still love helicopters, still love the ocean, but maybe not together. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Song or an artist that you have in your phone on your playlist, and when it comes on, you're unashamed, even though it's a little bit embarrassing. What would that be?
Man, we could probably do a whole episode on that. But no, I'll date myself a little bit. First album I ever bought, and this was on cassette and CD.
So you bought them both.
Yeah, me and my brother, we each, we had to share.
Yeah.
Was the Space Jam soundtrack.
How about
so
that?
it had a lot of good tracks. It had I Believe I Can Fly. It had, but if I hear Fly Like an Eagle by Seal, still to this day, I'm in a pretty good way. So and honestly, I stayed a pretty big R. Kelly fan, which is embarrassing. But Ignition Remix, that's another good one. Don't listen to that, kids. It's not a good song. But yeah,
It's the first reference to R. Kelly in 5 years on the podcast.
that's right. Well,
Probably our last.
well, cool. I'm glad
We'll
we're
keep
getting
it in.
canceled. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll keep it in.
We'll see. We'll
That's
see
right.
if that stays.
That's right. Last one. Something that's interesting about you that most people don't know about.
Yeah. Interesting about me. I'd probably just say, growing up, I think I probably I thought I was gonna be an actor, I think, or I think people thought I was gonna be an actor.
Yeah.
As I got older, I didn't really know that that's what I wanted to do, but I really thought that I'd go into like broadcasting. Like I thought I'd be a sportscaster.
Nice.
And be like Stuart Scott or somebody like those on Sports Center.
Booyah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's something that I probably a lot of people don't know about me. I love sports. I was never amazing at them. I was good enough to like play them, but I wasn't good enough to be an all-star or anything like that. But I just was always fascinated by them, and so I think that's something that about me. I watch every game. I take the first 2 days of March Madness off vacation every year just so I can kind of binge watch all of them. And so I'm a big sports guy.
Well,
so.
I didn't realize that I was sitting around a bunch of young legends. I mean, JR started doing all the production stuff in high school.
Yep.
Zach started doing this stuff. He was running the Zone when he was in the Zone, which is our children's area. And then, you had made me aware that you had done some dramas back in the day when we were doing some of the dramas. But even before we started, I was like, hey, JR, do you remember that kid that was up on stage with the camera with wheels? I mean, because I remember us talking about him, and then JR goes, it was Connor. I'm like,
He's pointing at me.
Oh my gosh, man!
Yeah, he remembers. Yeah,
Dude,
I was
that's
like 8
so
years
wild.
old, something like that. My family, we all volunteered in tech services growing up, and
That's so wild. Man.
it was nuts. It was nuts that they let me even do that. But I was up there wheeling around and probably getting in everybody's way, and
Dude, I mean, it's impressive, man. I mean, that's a lot of that's expensive equipment that they put you on, and you're right up there on stage moving around. I mean,
right.
in your little black outfit where nobody can barely
Nobody really
see you.
see
Yeah.
bleach blonde hair.
You basically look about the same, except for that beard you got.
Nothing's
It's
changed,
a good beard
man.
too, by the way.
I appreciate that.
Well, listen, let's dive in. Our 2 words for today that I think are super important for us as men to understand are the 2 words. You're qualified. And I don't know what it is, but as you and I were talking, I asked you to think about just what are some words that resonate with you, and so you went, yeah, I think it's this one. You're qualified. And so why did this one, out of all the 2 words on all the planets,
Yeah.
resonate with you?
Yeah. I think probably just because it's it's what I've probably struggled with most in my own life. Not only in ministry, just either in the professional world or really whatever it was I was doing.
Sure.
You know, and some of my backstory probably affects some of that.
Right.
You know, right out of high school, I just felt like everybody else knew exactly what they were going to do with their life, and I just kind of had no idea. And so I didn't go to college, you know, like a lot of them did, and so I think every job that I stepped into after that, and even going into ministry, I think I've just always had kind of this almost imposter syndrome of like, man, one of these days people are going to realize like I'm not supposed to be doing what I'm doing, you know. And so I think I've struggled with it. It's also affected just how I've looked at ministry, and that's kind of what I want to dive into today. Is just that qualification piece has held me back from, you know, a lot of years of probably helping a lot of people. But eventually I went with Jesus and did those things, but it took me a really, really long time. Yeah. So I think it's a big one for men, because I would have to guess a lot of dudes feel the same way.
So you literally graduated from high school, and did not go to college.
Nope.
Moved to Nashville, and you told me that you were doing these things where you would host these like dog shows and like beauty pageants for little girls, and then
it's amazing what you'll do when you're 21 and starving. But
it's pretty wild.
I did MC work some, and I started out of high school. I started getting more work down in Nashville, and I had done some of that just on camera type of stuff. You know, even here at Southland, pretty quick they found out you're probably better in front of this camera than you are behind it. But did some hosting and some different things like that. When I moved to Nashville, that was kind of the reason behind that. But man, I did all kinds of crazy stuff. My first job down there, you know, when you stay in a hotel and there's like that channel that's like about the hotel.
As soon as you turn it on.
I like showed you how to work your remote in Holiday Inn Express. Yeah, just really
small celebrity, guys. What do you think?
Dreams come true. It's really the moral of the story.
That's right. That's right.
No, I hosted beauty pageants, which was just awful. I did that for way too long. I hosted dog shows. Dog shows are way more fun, by the way.
Were they?
Yeah, you see some crazy stuff there. But yeah, that's actually what got me to move to Nashville, and did that for a while.
That
and
is
then
crazy.
Luckily landed a job at a bank.
Yeah,
ended up doing some stuff like that for them too. Right. But yeah,
and so real quick, so you're at a bank, and not that that's an area of your core competencies. You just
failed math in high school.
Yeah,
so
I mean, and so there's some people that you get connected with that invite you to be a part of a church plant.
Yeah,
and I'll just kind of bundle this one so we can kind of dig into the meatier part of where we're going. But you're down there for a while and you're helping out with this church plant, but eventually there's a connection that we have with you, and we reach out to you and ask if you'd come and be a part of our team. And so, I mean, it's kind of two parts. Did you wrestle with ministry, and what were your feelings along the way when it came to someone asking you to be a part of a church plant, helping them plant a church, or coming on staff back here? What were some of those lies or misconceptions, or personally, did you go, man, I've been waiting on this, or you go, man, I don't know that I can do this?
No, it was more running from it probably, just because I didn't think I could.
Yeah.
And like you said, I was in my 20s. You know, was well established down there, had a good job at the bank. I loved it, you know, and was honestly really enjoying it. Kind of living the bachelor life, but had good friends, had good community down there, and there was a couple that I worked with at that bank, and they were both fairly new believers. I mean, not crazy new, but honestly, just the conversations that we'd had at the workplace, they kind of rejuvenated my faith a little bit, because they would ask these questions, and they knew that I was a believer and always had been, but they would ask these questions that kind of forced me to dust the pages off my Bible a little bit, because I didn't want to lead them astray in any way, and so it kind of forced me to study up a little bit. And
isn't that wild how those two people just so happened, you working at a bank, reignited some stuff with you and Jesus, and then also began to open up a door for how you might serve.
Yeah,
What'd you do in the church plant?
They came to me a few months later and were like, "Hey, we'd love if you were part of this. We're helping the guy that married us start a church."
Okay.
And I was like, they were just like, "We're wondering if you'd help us out for a while." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, I don't want any,
Sure.
I don't want any part of that. Like it's, I grew up in Southland. The church was already planted. Like I didn't even know what those two words really meant together.
Sure.
But they kept asking. I kept saying no. I threw money at them, thinking they'd go away, and they were like, "No, we really want you to be involved. I think you'd be great." So I kind of reluctant. I was like, "What's like the minimum amount of time that I can serve on your little launch team or whatever it is?"
Right
I mean,
there.
I was real cynical about it, and they were like, 3 months, and in about 30 days, man, I just fell in love with what I saw God doing, and got to see people worshiping in houses, got to see people baptized in swimming pools and bathtubs, and pretty quickly after that I was in. But we all kind of just served in a variety of ways, and you understand this from having planted a church yourself, but like, you kind of just jump in with wherever. I served on our connections team, held doors open, I set up chairs, I rocked babies in the nursery, and then as we kind of were forming a leadership team, we didn't have elders yet just because we were so new, but we kind of formed a leadership team. We had this retreat, and we were worshiping together and just praying about, this kind of first year of church planting. And I remember just tearing up and just kind of feeling the Holy Spirit just nudge me, and it was kind of a big nudge. And I just confessed. I said, "Guys, I feel like God's calling me to ministry. I just have no idea what that looks like, and I don't know why, and I don't know why he's telling me that." And the lead pastor of the church plant and a guy who later would jump on staff as well, they kind of were smirking at each other, and I'm like, "Why are you laughing at me? Like I'm crying in my heart out over here." And they just looked at me and they said, "We've been praying about you being our first student pastor. We just never thought you'd do it."
Wow.
And so a few months later, as the story goes, that's what I jumped in doing. I did middle school and high school, and I did that for about 2 years. So for that plant. So
And you were doing that when we reached out to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure was. And some of that was because, I actually preached a sermon at church plant, and we had meetings and stuff on Sunday afternoon. And my mom, she texted me and was like, "Hey, have you watched Southland?" "No, Mom, I was busy today.
Yeah.
I don't. Did you watch me online?"
That's right.
She's like, "Well, watch it. It's really, really good." And I'm like, "All right." And then she texted me like an hour later and was like, "Did you watch it?" I was like, "Mom, I know John's great. Okay, but I'll watch it." And she said, "You really need to watch it." And that was actually an announcement. They basically had made an announcement that Southland was starting a church planting initiative across Kentucky.
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of it other than just, man, good for Southland. I was like, if anybody will do that well, it'll be them. And I knew that.
Yeah, it matters.
But then a few months later, just started getting some calls just of guys going, "Hey, you're kind of in our you grew up here, and you're also part of a church plant. And so we really just want to have conversations with people who've been a part of one." And that actually ended up just as some really close friendships forming. And and then after that,
cool.
I felt like God was really calling me to move up just to help out and just volunteer. So I left the job at the bank, left the church plant, and loved both of those things. It was really hard, but I just moved up here in the middle of the night and started volunteering, and nobody really knew what I was doing up here. But yeah, it was really cool.
I think most people that serve vocationally at churches, I think there's got to be a moment. I think this is a lot more common than people realize. They see us on staff and they go, "Oh, and this was a battle for me." And it's been a battle at times, just reminding myself of who I am and what he's done. But I remember just honestly not feeling qualified. I tell people all the time, I'm the last person to be doing this. Yeah. I mean, in high school, if you'd have told me, you're gonna up in the ministry, I went, "You need a drug test," because it's just not gonna happen. It's never gonna happen. And it's so different now thinking about some of those things. But I remember all that. I mean, I my senior year, I've been a Christian not quite a year. My youth pastor, Phil Miller, was like, "Hey, you should go into Bible college. You should go to ministry." And I'm like, I just got a Bible. I'm just barely getting into this thing, and how could I do that? And so I really didn't wrestle with it. I was doing athletics at the time. I was a high jumper and a sprinter, and I played football at our high school, and ended up going to the University of Louisville to run track. But my athletic ability wasn't really the reason. The reason was I really didn't feel qualified. Because here's what I thought: these misconceptions, or these lies that the enemy brings up, and that is, "Hey, I've only been a Christian for a little bit, not very long. How could I do that? How could I go to Bible college?" On top of that, I was a humongous sinner. I mean, I was. I mean, just from 7th grade until my junior year of high school. I do what people do when they're grown adults or in college. I mean, I chased all those things out of my own anger, out of my own brokenness. And as I'm thinking about that, I go, yeah, that's not what people who go into ministry do. That's not what their past looks like at all, you know?
No, you're exactly right.
I think that people that go to Bible college are people that grew up in great Christian homes with great Christian marriages and great Christian families. And I thought Bible college was for students who, you know, their dad was a pastor or an elder. You know, I think about like John's story, and I go, well, that's probably what most people think. You know, and so that's I mean, there's no pastor or there's no elder. I've looked in my family tree, and it's pretty busted, and I couldn't find one. Yeah, I'm the only Hatfield going to church at that time. You know, and so I didn't like to public speak. I'm working on my daughter right now, just helping her understand how important that is, because I took zeros. I would be loud and obnoxious, but when it came to doing anything serious, I had too much insecurity, and the idea of me going to Bible college to do something of something that I knew very little about did not seem like an optimal idea for me. You know, so here's the question for us as we really get in. What do you think are some of the misconceptions or lies that men have that really create a burden or a barrier for them to jump into kingdom work and just serve? And we're not talking about jumping into vocational ministry, but when you give your life to Christ, we're really invited into kingdom ministry. But what are the misconceptions and lies that people have around that?
No, for sure. One thing Nickel had said to me one time that really stuck with me is we tend to make this distinction in our heads, and we think that there's like professional Christians and non-professional Christians. It's not the case, you know, and I think what's interesting now is there differences in what vocational ministry looks like? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I think one thing that we tend to forget is that whatever your vocation is your ministry.
Yeah, that's right.
Which means if you drive a bus, guess what? You're in bus ministry.
Yeah.
Like if you cut hair, you're in hair ministry.
Yeah.
Like, you know, whatever it is that, you know, Paul talks about that. Colossians 3 says, whatever you do, you know, do it as though it's the Lord your God you're serving. So I think that's one thing that we tend to kind of go, well, there's these people do this for a job, and so they do ministry. Yeah. And I do this for a job, and so I don't have to do ministry. And I mean, the Bible, it doesn't let us escape that.
It doesn't.
You know, and so I think that's I think that's a way sometimes we try to let ourselves off the mat. And I was the same way, you know, and I mean, I said, no, I work at the bank, and I'm gonna love people, you know, all that kind of thing. But, you know, I'm not in ministry. That's not what I do. Yeah. And it wasn't really until, you know, I stepped into church planting and was doing those kind of things that God started to kind of open some of those doors, and I started to see, okay, I can pray with people at my desk here. You know, I can, and, you know, people kind of started to recognize those things, and even people that weren't in ministry said, hey, notice something kind of different about you lately, and you know, notice you tend to do things a little bit differently now, and you know, and it was really just because I was seeing what I did as a ministry, as opposed to seeing other people do that. I do this, and I can escape the responsibility of it. We're all called, you know, as much as we hate to admit it, we all are.
We're all called. That's right, and sometimes it's either our past, like me, or insecurity, like us, or comparison. You know, we look around and we go, I can't pray like Nickel or Weiss. I don't know the Bible the way that they do. I can't, you know, and so we think, well, I can't do it. And comparison is, you know, we've all heard this, comparison is a thief of joy, but it's actually also the thief of mission. And I think that's super important to be aware of. And I'll dig out some list of people in the Bible. I think this is always fun to kind of get us understanding as to who God uses, because God used a lot of people in the Bible. And as we're thinking about our own lives, and as guys are listening to this or watching this, thinking about their own lives, it's just really interesting. God uses flawed and broken people. That's all he uses.
Like,
you know,
exclusively.
I mean, Adam, first man that God made, you know, he was passive and didn't protect his wife in the garden. Abraham, the first patriarch, you know, we hear so much about Father Abraham. He grew up in a family where they made and sold idols. They had an idol shop. It's crazy. And then what you realize about that is that he was a polytheist, which means he served many, many gods. And eventually God gets a hold of him and tells him to leave. He's like, where? He's just follow me. And he does. And God makes him the father of all nations. And then in the midst of him being called, in a lot of tough situations, Abraham actually lies to protect himself or his wife. He's disobedient to God. Moses, there's a bunch of things, but through God tries to get his attention through a burning bush, and then he shows him miracles of a staff and a snake, and then he calls him to go to Pharaoh and to tell him to release the people of Israel, all these Jewish slaves, and immediately when God does all, he's just seen these crazy things,
It's crazy.
and he just goes, "Yeah, I can't. I'm not good at. I can't speak well.
Can't string a
Many
sentence together.
people believe that he had a stutter. Who knows? But he immediately looks at himself and goes, "Hey, I'm not qualified." Even though God's looking at him, going, "I'm telling you to go. I'm telling you to go." David, run of his family. I mean, Jesse had 8 sons, and Samuel comes led by the Holy Spirit to go to him and says, "Hey, we're looking for our next king." And he's like, "Okay, well, let me grab my oldest," because that's what they just assumed. And he looks at him and goes, "No,
These ain't
no.
it.
All right, let me grab my next boy. And eventually he goes, "Hey, you got any more?" And he's like, Yeah, there's one. He's out in the fields. He's a shepherd."
Yeah.
And as soon as Samuel locks eyes with him, he goes, "Yeah, that's our next king."
Yeah.
Joshua, who is phenomenal in the Bible, he runs ahead of God many, many times. He makes decisions apart from God. He impacts the people of Israel because of sometimes him not being patient. Rahab was a prostitute who ends up playing a significant role in her brokenness at a time in Israel's history that was super important. Samson, super flawed man. I mean, big fan of himself, battled pride. That was his downfall. Gideon, I mean, the stories about Gideon are really, really cool, but Gideon really battled fear and insecurity and doubt. Yeah. Jeremiah was a prophet who struggled with his own calling. He battled doubt and depression and extreme loneliness. Mary and Joseph, the parents of Jesus, ordinary teenagers. Yeah. Nothing special about them. And God's brought his son into the world through these common, ordinary teenagers. Then Saul, in the New Testament, one of my favorite people in the Bible. Yeah. He's a guy that hated Christians. He was zealous for God, but he missed Jesus, and he makes it his mission to stomp out Christianity. He was a terrorist. He wanted to create spiritual genocide. Stephen had just been killed under his watch and provision, and he's on his way on this Damascus road, and he encounters Jesus, and Jesus changes his life and changes his name, and then Paul becomes like this father in the faith, this amazing leader and church planter,
Incredible evangelist. Yeah.
Yeah, and he, more about half of the New Testament is from his hand, and it just blows me away. And so as you think about these men or women in the Bible, I mean, what resonates with you about just how God used these flawed men and women?
Oh yeah, I mean every single one that you name is spot on, and we could do this for hours because it's just I love the fact that it's a recurring theme throughout the Bible, and it's like all of them. Like it's not like he used a couple of really unlikely people. It's like no, like he like exclusively like just flawed, broken, the last people that would ever been picked is who God uses. I think about David a lot, just from the standpoint of being picked last, and just I think he embodies that really well. And it's like, just like you said, like, Jesse, I think when Samuel comes to him is like, you got any more of these sons? I literally think because he goes, well, I think it's the first time he remembers he's got another one. I really do. I feel bad for David in that moment, but
low man on the
absolutely.
On the org chart.
And being a shepherd, it was not a glamorous thing back then. I mean, it was, essentially like a slave, and so what's interesting and what I love about David's story is, he wasn't qualified to be a king, at all, at least by what the world standards was. Right. But God qualified him, and the cool thing even about that, David, he was man after God's own heart, and there's amazing things we can say about David. But David grew up to be a really great king, but he also grew up to be really sinful, and he made a lot of mistakes
in the midst of being called, not before he was called.
Absolutely,
in the midst of it.
Absolutely, and the thing about that, and I just think it captures just God's heart for us and his character for us is, God's all knowing. He knew David's past, and he knew his present, when he was out there being a shepherd, but he also knew his future. Yeah. And he knew the sins he would someday commit.
Still calling him.
He still picked him. And I think if anything, man, that just shows, man, God really, really does want us to go with him. Regardless how flawed we are. It's just awesome.
Just bring it.
Just bring it.
Come
man.
with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Just to center in on the Gospels for a second, when we're looking at the disciples, when Jesus, his ministry begins, he didn't go find the elite of the elite. He didn't look for the most influential, the most intellectual, the most respected. He didn't go to the biggest cities or the most revered families. Jesus didn't go to the local rabbis and go, hey, who's your best guys? Who's your best students? Who has the greatest potential, the highest ceiling? He doesn't go and say, hey, who's got the best stock here? What can we do? He didn't do that. He didn't have a robust job description either when it came to being his disciple. He didn't have this crazy interview process either like we have at church. It's like he literally looks at these guys. He doesn't go, hey, tell me all that you know about the Old Testament or the Hebrew text. He doesn't do anything. He just says, hey, I want you to come follow me.
Yeah.
And they do. And it's crazy. And Jesus goes to all these small towns and villages, towns where there are even only a few hundred people, and he just walks up and he invites them to follow him, and they do. It's crazy. And most of these guys they're not in like higher level work. They're not.
No.
They're in a family trade, or they're with their family business because that's all that they could do.
Yeah.
And so.
We think of them as like old guys too, and
Yeah.
they weren't.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like-
I mean, we've all probably seen maybe an Easter pageant where you see these 40-year-old guys in their baptism robes and their sandals, and it's like these dudes were teenagers.
Yeah.
These dudes were teenagers, and they were young, high school. Again, we understand these guys in their background. What we understand is that Jesus. He went after the B team. He went after JV. He would take these 12 guys and he would do life with them, and he would teach them. They would experience him teaching others. They would see him interact and connect with people of all backgrounds, and then they would see Jesus do miracles and heal people. And even reminds them of who they are, and that they didn't choose Jesus, but Jesus chose them. And John 15:16 says, "You didn't choose me; I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And so whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you." Jesus has gone to these homegrown, regular nobodies, and he calls them to a mission and a purpose, and entrusts them with taking the greatest news to the known world. And I love that. And just to make sure we're clear, in Acts, when the church begins, Acts 4:13, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. I love that. Jesus had options.
Oh, as many as you wanted.
Yeah.
As many as you wanted. Could have picked anybody.
Yeah, he chose unschooled, ordinary men.
He didn't use a lot of Pharisees, like, except for an example, maybe.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, he didn't use the people that had
the pedigree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They wanted people to think that they had it all together. He didn't call any of those.
He took these ordinary dudes and poured into their life and entrusted them to do extraordinary things. And I love that. We're here because of really 11 guys who said, you know what, I'll go. I'll be available, And so why is that important to us as men?
I think it's just a great reminder that, and it's been said before, but, nobody's a nobody to God.
Yeah.
Everybody's a somebody to God.
Yeah.
And I think just looking, the important thing to remember is, even as we look at those guys, they spent years, with Jesus, and they walked with him. They were with him every day. They ate with him. They learned from him. They saw him perform miracles. They spent so much time with him. And even after all that, they still didn't have it all together.
No.
They still got it wrong all the time. They were still flawed. They were still human, even in the midst of seeing all of that.
Yeah.
And honestly, just the fact that, but the cool thing about them is that, after Jesus goes to heaven, they scatter. And just like you said, we're here doing this right now because the gospel rested on their shoulders to spread it, and they did. Yeah. And they did just incredible things with their lives, because their lives have been changed by Jesus. And so I think just the fact that, they never arrived.
Right.
They never got it all together.
Yeah.
Man, that gives me great hope because, man, every day I mess up. And every day
no one's arrived.
Nobody's arrived.
Not anybody that in our church, not anybody that you look at and you go, man, they're such a phenomenal Christ follower. It's like, but they've not arrived.
I will never have arrived until I arrive in heaven.
That's it.
That's it. I mean, that's the only time.
So really the big point for today is that God only uses flawed and imperfect people. He only uses broken and flawed people because that's all that there is, right?
That's all there is.
That's all there is. And so that's the recurring theme in the Bible. and in the early church, and even for the church now. And so I love this. Hudson Taylor, a British missionary to China in the 19th century, once said, "All God's giants have been weak people." I think that's cool.
Yeah.
You can see the truth of that statement throughout the Bible. You can see it in the lives of the great giants of church history. God loves to use weak people to fulfill his purposes. And I love what Paul says, 1 Corinthians 1, 26-28. He says, "Remember, dear brothers and sisters, that few of you were wise in the world's eyes, or powerful, or wealthy when God called you. Instead, God chose things the world considered foolish." That's us.
Yeah.
"In order to shame those who think that they are wise. And he chose things that were powerless to shame those who were powerful. God chose things despised by the world, things counted as nothing at all, and used them to bring to nothing what the world considers important. God only uses broken people because that's all he has." I love the statement, God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
That's good.
Jesus' desire for us is to partner with him to live our lives on mission. And I think we think that what God's looking for are the powerful, the affluent, and the charismatic, or people with dynamic personalities. And we think God's looking for ability, and what he's really looking for is availability.
Yeah.
And he'll equip available, willing people, and that's a big step. And so here's the hurdle that we got to get over, so that way guys go, okay, because the question is, what makes us qualified? Why am I qualified to live my life on mission? Yeah, how do I know? What does that mean? So walk us through that.
No, I mean, honestly, the first step is, once we've given our lives to Christ, that's obviously the first step. And when we do that, we've become children of God. We're now adopted into his family.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would tell anybody if you're thinking about serving or thinking about ministry. Obviously, that's a no-brainer, but it is a good place to start. Say, hey, you've given your life to Jesus, and once we've done it, the Bible actually tells us once we've done that, we've gone public with our faith. We've repented of our sins, and we've actually gone forward, in our faith and baptism.
Yeah.
The gift of the Holy Spirit is now with us.
Yeah.
So we have that. And that Spirit's actually the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead.
Yeah.
And it's inside of us.
Yeah.
It's not a different one. It's not an artificial version.
Not outside of our body,
one,
living in us.
Yeah. And that's honestly what helps us to do ministry, in any way. Like that's what gives us those giftings, and we'll flesh that out more, here in a minute. But as Jesus, he invites those disciples to follow him, and he brings them in. He's doing the same thing with us. He invites us into his word, to spend one-on-one time with him, and to go the places that he would go.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when guys are like, well, I just don't really know what that looks like, it sounds too simple, but a lot of times I'll tell them, hey, go to the places that Jesus would go, hang out with Jesus, the people that Jesus hung out with, and just love the people that Jesus loves, which is everybody. And so everywhere that you are, you have an opportunity to do it.
All day long.
And so humble and obedient men, just humble men that realize they don't have it all together is key.
We just talked about that last week with John Sampson. Crushing pride.
Yeah, he was awesome. Just men who are humble enough to say, hey, I don't have it all together.
Yeah.
That's because that's what shows people our witness, of how great he is, not how great we are.
Absolutely.
Those are just kind of tangible things that I start with guys, but it's just showing you, hey, man, we're not looking for a specific set of skills here. We're looking just for faith and obedience, and just like you said, it's willingness and it's ability, availability, not ability.
Yeah,
so
that's good. Ephesians 2:8-10. This is my favorite passage in all the scriptures. For by grace you've been saved through faith, and it's not from yourselves; it's a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. And then it says, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do.
Isn't that cool?
It's wild. And so we're saved by grace. We can't do it. We can't earn it. He invites us into it. And it's through our faith. It's through our ability to go, you know what, I trust him. I trust what he's done for me is enough. It's a gift. Again, we can't earn it. It's not by works. And then it says that we're God's handiwork, and it's this little Greek word poema, which means something made by God himself and purposed, which is really, really cool. And it's like, man, the curtain starts getting pulled back on us to go, wow, God made me, Imago Dei, but he also made me poema, something made by God himself and purposed, which means he has a purpose for our lives. That it's not just you and I and Zach and JR who are on staff here. It's all of us. He calls all of us to do that. And
you were intentionally created by the creator of the universe Sometimes we just don't stop and think about that.
It's pretty big.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Very intentional.
And God wants to use flawed and imperfect little old you and me. And he wants to use your story and your strengths and your past and your junk and your pain to be this amazing billboard for the world. And sometimes that builds up the church, builds up other believers. And sometimes it really just helps paint a picture for who God is so that people might go, people who don't know him, lost and broken people just outside of Jesus to go, oh, wow, that's what it looks like. Because I thought it was this, but it's actually this. Yeah, absolutely. Broken me, loved by God. Yeah. He can love you too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Bible calls us living letters. It was interesting in just prepping for this, just scriptures, the Holy Spirit brought me to this, but it says, 2 Corinthians 3:2-3, it says, the only letter of this is Paul talking to the church in Corinth. He says, the only letter of recommendation we need is you yourselves. Your lives are a letter written on our hearts. Everyone can read it and recognize our good work among you. He's talking about their investment in them, and then them seeing. Paul's able to see that living out in their lives. He says, clearly you are a letter from Christ, showing the result of our ministry among you. This letter is written not with pen and ink, but with the Spirit of the living God. It is carved out not on tablets of stone, but on human hearts. And in some ways, what Paul is saying is that our lives are, in some ways, a gospel letter, just like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And in those four gospels, what we notice about these four gospels is we see Jesus' his activity, we see his teaching, we see him healing, we see his resurrection. And what Paul is saying is that when we walk with him and when we go where he goes, then what happens is that people are able to get a view of something that's going on in our lives. They can actually get a picture of Jesus' activity or his teaching or his healing or his resurrection from us.
Yeah.
From us through the life change that's happening. And so I'll take it down the church planting road for a second because I love the stories around our church planters. And being a church planter myself, you've been in church planting.
Sure.
You're just looking for available and willing, but talk about just what you've seen in the time that you've served on that team and a lot of those guys and those families or those men and women that have been serving those ways. Talk about why that's been so impressive.
Oh man, it's been the stories have been awesome, and that was kind of the cool part about the role that I had was it was mainly just to kind of help share those stories with people, but. Now I think about guys like Michael Clark. He was
dump out his story a little bit,
dude. He's awesome. He's a 7-time felon, but battled addiction, drug abuse, and all kinds of stuff. Grew up in Eastern Kentucky. Grew up, in the Whitesburg area, and was in prison. First Bible that he ever had was in prison, and I think he read it cover to cover 3 times, and. Just this clearly, God just clearly ordained his life and turned his life around. He's baptized there, gets out, he works in addiction, recovery care, and one of our partners, and he helps people, basically overcome some of the same things that he had gone through. But plants Rooted Church, it would have been just last year. They just celebrated their 1 year, which is awesome in Whitesburg. Church plant.
No formal
education. No. He got his degree from UK, but it wasn't a theology degree like that. And just he's one of the best preachers. If you ever get a chance to head down to Whitesburg, Kentucky, and just hear him, go to Rooted Church, man, he's just awesome because he's just so raw and he's so real, and just his humility to say. It honestly makes me think of, Saul, Saul to Paul conversion. It's like, hey, God has changed my life. He can change yours too. And if he can use me, man, he can use anybody. And so when the floods hit, Rooted Church, one thing that was really, really cool, they, for the city of Whitesburg, they basically became the American Red Cross. They set up tents, they passed out water. They served people, they helped people, they fed people, and they just loved on them. And that was a devastating thing for Eastern Kentucky. Yeah. But it just was a great picture of what the church is actually supposed to be.
I mean, it's first. Think about that.
First year.
This is your first year of a plan.
Yeah.
Which is so critical, and so much of it hangs in the balance. You're trying to meet people, bring them in. You're trying to raise funds and money. You're trying to find the right facility. You're trying to raise up leaders. And then a gigantic flood comes in and just destroys, just wipes out.
And they didn't blink.
It's their first year.
They said, this is what we're going to go do.
Yeah.
And they did it. And, I mean, it was incredible just to see the pictures of it, but also just hear the stories,
Yeah.
of people because everybody at that church had a family member,
Yeah.
going through something because of
Yeah.
it. But man, they all banded together, and like I said, they became what the church is supposed to embody,
Yeah.
and that's just God's love in action.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
did that.
That's
It
awesome.
ain't about a building. They
it's about the
they meet
people.
in a kitchen, which is awesome. But man, Michael is just, and I could sit here and talk for hours about all those guys.
All
We
those
got
guys are
5 plants,
awesome.
which is great.
Yeah.
And if you ever get a chance, go to southland.church, /planting. You can see all those stories. But man, all of them are just guys who were humble and obedient and just said, God.
Available.
And most of them, man, they don't have much of a pedigree, and we love it that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because God does too.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, here's a question we didn't talk about. I just thought about it this morning.
Yeah.
Why do you think the enemy wants to leave us in a place where we feel like we're unqualified?
Oh man, it's even though we can't see it, the clear tactic is just obviously so that we won't,
We doubt our identity.
yeah.
We doubt our ability.
we won't do anything.
Yeah.
We'll stay in isolation. That's another thing that we see a lot is just guys will stay in isolation. They won't be honest about some things, and once you bring some of that stuff to light, maybe about your story, it's amazing the healing that can take place. But he would love nothing more than in those whispers to say, "Hey, you're alone. You're the only one that goes through this," and
They can't use you.
yeah,
You
and
you
you're
still mess up.
disqualified.
Yeah, you still mess up. You got too much of a past. It's impossible. And again, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's someone in the Bible like Saul who became Paul, or Michael Clark, or myself, or you. Whatever the
Sure.
background. He just uses flawed and broken people. That's the reality. Hey, Locker Room, we are going to press pause on this one simply because there's a lot of information, a lot of good stuff that we covered. And so I wanted you to be able to digest this first part, and then next week we'll pick up the second part of this conversation with Connor Hall. You're qualified. So enjoy, and we'll catch you next week.